Rafi bhai,
Yes.
I'm sharing it's the same PowerPoint as the one we used at the fundraiser.
Okay.
Want to just move any of the pictures up and down. I've put the ones, so I moved Imam Safed a little, I don't have too many of him, but I moved his to a little bit to the top of you, and all, the rest are all new arrivals ones, so you can easily, you know, just be talking and I'll just show them on the background.
Okay, it's
So you're going to
top
be
of
showing those screens?
Yeah, I'll show them.
okay, top of the hour.
Do you have
Please.
those two pictures of the brothers that I had shared during the fundraiser?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. It's top of the hour. I'm going to start the webinar. And if you're not talking or you don't need to, please keep yourself muted. And 5 minutes after the hour, we'll start, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday. We will give everyone some time to settle in and join. Inshallah, we will start in 4 minutes. Just a little housekeeping. If you have any question or concerns, you will be able to type it in the chat or in a Q&A section. You will not be allowed to come on mic. So please do in mind, keep your questions in the chat and be respectful to everyone. And in Q&A, Jazakallah khair. Once again, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this weekend. Uh, Please keep, if you have any questions, do post it in the chat or in the Q&A session. Hopefully our guests will get to your questions. And just a request, please be respectful to one another. We will start in 1 minute. Assalamualaikum, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining. And Sister Hina, we are live. Please, stage is yours.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khair for joining us on this Saturday morning. I will just, subhanAllah. Our delegation just came back from the Kutupalong camps, and we wanted to share with you what we witnessed there, what we saw, and some next steps that we believe the community should take before we return. So just give me just 1 second while I just wanted to remind everybody that this special Justice for All program will be broadcast on MNTV, the Muslim Network TV. And so just letting all of you know that, inshallah. So our delegation returned to the United States after our visit to the Rohingya refugee camps in Kutupalong. And all of us wanted to share our experiences and insights from the trip, especially after the promises that we made to the people on the ground. So they were, this was all of us, and we had a very specific mission in mind. Now, personally, I've been working on the Rohingya cause for over a decade. And finally, after several years, I had wanted to go in 2017, but I was not able to go at that time when we were recording testimonies from as people were arriving into the camps in 2017. My children were young then, and I could not leave them alone. And alhamdulillah, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the opportunity again to go. And I really have been wanting to go and visit the people that I've been serving for the past over a decade, and to renew our intentions and renew focus on their cause. The camps are not a tourist destination. That's something that I just want to reiterate, because I've heard a lot of people be excited about wanting to visit. They are places of survival and resilience and extreme suffering. Our delegation was on the ground witnessing firsthand the struggles and the resilience of the Rohingya people. A massive fire and landslide happened just a few days after we left in the exact same camps that we were in. One of our staff members shared this photograph from his own tent. That, as you can see, the fire was so close to where he's living in this 10 by 10 shelter. We came to bear witness, and I came to meet the people, to listen, to learn, and to amplify their voices. The world attention has shifted, but the suffering of the Rohingya people has not ended. Our mission was clear. We were there we are conducting a survey of over 1,000 Rohingya women on the status of Rohingya women 7 years into living in these camps. So you are seeing some of our surveyors over here. This was our meeting with them. We are also interviewing newly arrived families, and one of our director of outreach will be sharing much more in detail about that, and individuals involved in key activities. We wanted to visit critical educational, healthcare, and employment initiatives to see how aid that was being sent, that we are working on pushing the State Department. As you know, President Trump has put a stop on all aid going to anywhere in the world, but the Rohingya camps have been given an exception, and aid will continue to flow to the Rohingya camps. So we also wanted to go and see how aid is being utilized and where are the holes, the loop that is aid getting to the people where it's most needed, the most vulnerable. We are writing a comprehensive report on the status of Rohingya women, and my colleague, our Director of of Legal Affairs, Sister Sabrina, will be sharing much more in detail about that report. And our aim is to share this report with the UN, with the US State Department, and other international bodies, as well as American Muslim and other American relief agencies who are working in the region, because once you survey the people and you realize what their actual needs are versus what they think their needs are. And obviously, our biggest mission is to raise public awareness about the ongoing crisis that the Rohingyas are facing. The genocide has not ended. Just a little bit of background. Since 2017, over 740,000 Rohingya have been forcibly displaced, fleeing to Bangladesh in search of safety. The international community has responded with the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice launching investigations into crimes against humanity and genocide. And I am proud to share with you that the testimonies that we gathered in 2017, especially of Tulatoli village, were used in both the ICC case and were the basis of the ICJ case that Gambia brought forth to the International Court. Subhanallah. And as all of you know, recently the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for the Burmese military leader. And Justice for All filed a case in 2020 with using an international justice lawyer. Alhamdulillah, after 4 years, we received this very, very amazing update. Alhamdulillah. So we understand the process of justice is slow, and this is the importance of our work. We cannot, we don't take blankets from you and take them over there. We are not a relief or a humanitarian agency. We are a human rights advocacy organization, and our work is policy-based. But when policy changes people's lives, we can impact many, many lives instead of just impacting the few. Alhamdulillah. And now understand that, Brother Rafi Ahmed, our Director of Outreach, will go more into the crisis that is currently occurring with 60,000 more newly arrived refugees coming in. But you have to understand that Rohingya and the Rakhine community have endured long-standing historical tensions. And the crisis right now, especially with the Arakan army, conducting what the final stages and the final solution of clearing out Burma of the Rohingya Muslims is taking place. Rakhine State remains the poorest region in Burma, and as many of you know, Burma has gone through a military coup, and the democratically elected government has been arrested, and the entire country is in chaos. So I would like to share a little bit. These women that we met, subhanallah, I wanted to just reflect a little bit about how they impacted me personally at a very, very spiritual level. Our first day in the camps was overwhelming. We sat with women, conducted one-on-one interviews, and held group discussions. 7 years since the 2017 genocide, their pain is still so raw. Many of them are so traumatized. But subhanallah, I was sharing this with our team, these 10 by 10 tents, so clean. I have not seen that level of cleanliness in that dire circumstances. Their clothes, subhanallah, clean. And you have to understand that the public restrooms, they have to use public restrooms, and water is scarce. They have these public wells where they go and fill up these buckets, silver buckets, looking buckets with water. And to keep a home and a little shelter like that where 10 to 11 people and their family are living in that shelter, in that tiny space, little children running on the streets, and to keep that all so clean. We didn't see bugs or flies or subhanallah. That was just, it was, I felt like a special, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's special blessing on them to be able to do this in those heartbreaking circumstances. And to say that we were not heartbroken would be a lie. And then to say that coming back, we are not so activated, that would be an even bigger lie. Really. I mean, I felt like this was a cause that I had taken on in my life, but now I feel even more greater. And I would not, the Gaza genocide is being broadcast on our screens. We see people dying every day, right? We see it, we saw it we see the bombings. But for the Rohingya, their genocide is taking place. They are being bombed. Their villages, they're being slaughtered at like bellies, slaughtered just face to face. But we are not able to see that because they don't have access to internet. Many of them don't have phones that they can broadcast their suffering on. But that does not mean that their suffering is not taking place. And subhanAllah, as we spoke to them, they were so happy just to see that someone had come from so far away to just listen to them, not to hand out something, but just to give them the honor of sitting and listening to them. SubhanAllah, that was something that I was very, very moved by. We there, and one biggest thing that I also observed was nobody complained about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not one, even despite the fact that several of them had, they used to live in 4-bedroom homes with rivers and orchards, and not all of them came from poverty. A lot of them were just people like perhaps you and me. But not one of them complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there was a complaint. They complained about the lack of action from the ummah. They complained about the lack of concern from the ummah. They said we had nothing. We had no weapons. They came and took even our kitchen knives away from us. Because I asked them, many of the ones that I spoke to, would you have stayed if you had known your conditions in the camp 7 years later? And they said, we would have stayed and fought, but we were abandoned. Not one Muslim country came to to save us. Subhanallah. So that was very, very powerful. We split into 4 groups and we visited 3 different camps where we met a spectrum of individuals, a sheikha, an imam's wife, unmarried women, mothers with children, many imams, educationists, doctors who are working in the camps, nurses who are working in the camps. We met newly arrived refugees. Some of the young women were working while others felt so trapped, uneducated, without resources, their future stolen, no access to anything, not even allowed a phone, not allowed education once they hit puberty. So imagine a life with no phones, no books, no markers, no internet, nothing, no toys, nothing. Subhanallah. And imagine a life where your very identity is denied because the refugees did not have any access to a status. They're not accepted as refugees by the Bangladeshi government. One other thing that I observed were what a deeply religious community. What a deeply, deeply religious community. Most of the reports that we had seen earlier, mostly from non-Muslim organizations, show women uncovered. But the reality was on the ground. Everyone that we met was in niqab. The men were deep, like every one of them was involved in dawah work, whether from in Burma or even in the camps. So many of them were brilliant, brilliant people. Oh my God, I just wished I could just start like a school for some of these women to teach them, because just the responses to the survey, their intuition, their concern for their own community, their understanding of their needs, this is so important to understand that these are not just these numbers that have no minds, or even though they have been kept uneducated for 3 generations, subhanallah. We also witnessed the Maslow's hierarchy of needs play out in real time. Those who had food and water worried about separation from loved ones or dangers of human trafficking. But those struggling for survival, who didn't even have food, had no time or even dreams beyond the next meal. So many spoke of their dignity, of how they were treated with disdain by aid workers, how they longed for respect despite whatever conditions they were in. And you're not going to understand that unless you speak to the people. At the same time, I witnessed a way of life that reminded me so much of the Sahaba. To understand what the Sahaba lived like, their neighborliness, how they shared, their humility, their faith that remained so unshaken despite unimaginable trials. I can share like some of these pictures that this woman that we met, her daughter was kidnapped, and the kidnappers wanted 1 lakh takas to return her child. And subhanallah, this sister, I'm sorry, just 1 second. This sister knew that her neighbor was a widow, and this is a neighbor in the camps, not a neighbor from back in Burma. And she had 1 ring, a reminder of her dead mother. Her mother had been killed in Burma by the Burmese military. And this young woman, she was one of our surveyors, she sold her ring and gathered money from all these neighbors, 2,000 from one, 1,000 more. And remember, these people do not have any access to funding. They cannot work. They're not allowed to work in the camps. So they don't know where their next, they don't have a paycheck, that their next paycheck will come in and they'll be able to do it. And at that time, to give that sacrifice of the little gold that she had, her mother's memory, and remember, this is her mother's memory. She has nothing else left of the memory of her life over there. And she sold this to save this woman's daughter. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. I can say, and the sister, we interviewed her son who had just arrived, and he had been tortured, and the marks of the torture were on his back. And while we were talking, she was so quiet and almost disassociated, almost with a smile on her face. And as we got up to leave, and I thanked her for allowing us to enter their home and be able to interview her son, she just looked at me, and subhanallah, that hadith al-Qudsi that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, you did not feed me and you did not come visit me while I was sick. And we will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, how can you be sick? How can you be hungry? And Allah will say that my people were hungry, my people were sick, and you did not visit them. If you had visited, you would have found me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as my witness, I've been doing community work and dawah work for majority of my life. And in these camps, I can say I found God many times. So Jazakallah khair, that subhanallah, that hug, oh, subhanallah. I wasn't giving her anything. I wasn't giving her money. I wasn't doing anything for her except for just listening to her, subhanallah. So, Jazakallah khair. I've taken up a little bit of time from you all. I'm going to hand it over now to our brother, dear brother Zahir Adil, who is going to be speaking about the status of education in the camps, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Hina, for that emotional introduction to the visit to the camps. I'm sorry, my laptop has been acting up, so I'm on the phone. So you'll see a little bit of shakiness as I'm trying to hold my phone as steady as I can. So I apologize for that. Yeah, the visit to the camp, as I tell people, was many things all at once. It was Spiritual for sure, because that's where you find the people who are so dependent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the one entity that they have. We are all secondary. We all are fleeting, but that's the one entity that will stay. And they certainly know that. I have found few people with as much faith in God as these people in the Rohingya camps at Kutupalong in Bangladesh. But of course, we have to also have some responsibility to them. And one of the areas that many of the families told us that is really lacking for them is in the field of education. NGO run schools for them are not a solution. In fact, they said that yes, while NGO run schools have different grades, it doesn't matter whether you're in grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, the same thing is taught over and over and over again. And so the syllabus that is being used is certainly not what we would find in a regular school. And without exception, all of the families that at least Rafi Bhai and I met with, they said that NGO run schools are not a solution for their children. The other thing that we saw is that there are some privately run schools, community schools, and these are better run. They do follow a certain proper curriculum. They also have um, more trust from the families themselves. But then community schools are not supported by the NGOs. And so they severely lack the resources that they would need to make that education more effective than it currently is. We have been connected with a few schools, community run schools, and while these are not technically allowed, the Bangladeshi authorities will look the other way because they do serve a purpose, and they are the ones that are more accepted by the families. Now, how do these community schools run? You'll be surprised. Hina just touched upon it that you have these people who will share whatever little that they have in trying to build their own communities, in trying to help the new people who have come on. And that's the same thing that's happening with these schools. So the one that we visited, they have had some 34 different families turn over their shelters, well, at least for the time that the school is in operation. So these 10 by 10-foot shelters that they have, they serve as classrooms for the time that the children will be in that class, right? It's such a small place, and in that one of those schools, you will find maybe 40, 50 students trying to learn. What's even more surprising is that they can only teach when the sun is out, because there's only one little small bulb that will light up that entire classroom. And the Bangladeshis, unfortunately, have not allowed them proper solar panels with batteries attached so that you can actually have light after hours. So it's dark in the shelter, even during the daytime. But at least at that time, you have one solar panel running one small bulb, and using the light from that one small bulb, all of these students are learning. But let me run forward. The thing is that these students are being taught a curriculum which is not going to help them in Bangladesh. The chances that these people are repatriated back to the Arakan area is small. And so even if they do go back there, would they be allowed the dignity that they seek? I don't know. Wallahu alam, but probably not. Whether it's the Myanmar military, the military junta, or the Arakan army, all of them are targeting the Muslims. And even if they were to go back because of some international pressure, they will not be allowed the dignity and the respect that these people deserve. And when they are not allowed the dignity and the respect that these people deserve, that every person deserves in the world, then their children would not be allowed to study in Myanmar either. Now let's look at the other side of the coin. If they are not able to go back, then if you do not get them an education which actually serves them in Bangladesh, then they would not be able to go in for higher education. They would not be psychologists, they would not be doctors, they would not become engineers, whatever they want to be, right? And so you're creating an entire generation, and this would be the third generation of Rohingya who are left without an education. And that's where you and we come in. What we want to do is to tell the Bangladeshis that let them study, let them learn. Let them learn the same curriculums that will allow them to enter Bangladeshi universities and colleges. And if they go back to Myanmar with that education, alhamdulillah, I mean, they'll be able to serve the communities in Myanmar. If they are not able to go back to Myanmar, in that case, at least these people will become useful contributors to society within Bangladesh. But to keep them there without an education, to force them to study the Myanmar curriculum, which will not be useful for entering Bangladeshi colleges and universities, does not help anybody. It certainly does not help the Rohingya, and it will not help Bangladesh. And if they are not given an education at all, then it will not help them, even if they were to go back to Arakan. I'm going to stop here. We have other colleagues. I'm available for questions. And Hina, back to you. You're muted, Hina.
So, thank you so much for that insight, Brother Zahir, visiting those Rohingya-run community camps and listening, reading the survey answers by many of the mothers who send their children there. Was very enlightening as well. And to talk about that and more, we will bring on our lovely Director of Legal Affairs, Sister Sabrina Mirza.
Assalamu alaikum. I apologize, I'm a little under the weather, so my voice might go in and out, but thank you so much for joining. And I just want to echo a lot of what my colleagues mentioned about what we felt entering the camps, meeting these beautiful, beautiful people who are so dignified and such embodiments of faith under incredibly difficult circumstances. Every woman that I met would mention how they were coping by relying upon Allah. That's all we have. That's what we rely on. And they wouldn't complain in a way, as Sister Hannah mentioned. It was, you could feel their pain when you hugged them, when the way that they would make dua. Some of them, we experienced just the sincerity in their voice coming from someone of complete neediness, complete reliance upon Allah. That was very touching and something that we can't fully share, but it was something we deeply felt being in the camps. And it was a real privilege and an honor to be amongst people who are so such honorable, dignified servants of God, first and foremost, and how they supported one another in their sisterhood and their brotherhood in times, as was mentioned, when they needed money. And not one of them come from means, and not one of them is in a situation not of desperation, but how they would pull together and still contribute so that someone could get their child back if they were held ransom, or just help new coming refugees who are not yet registered, so they're not entitled to shelter or rations. So those were experiences that were very moving for us as we met each of the families that we were meeting with. So I just wanted to quickly share about the survey that was mentioned earlier. So prior to us going into the camps, we had done a survey of 1,000 Rohingya women with one of our staff on the ground was managing that. And there were 5 women who went and interviewed these women. And we have the results of that we're analyzing and putting together for this report that touched upon their experiences in the camp now, 7 years in, their experiences with education, with healthcare, employment, safety. Those were broad general areas that we had asked them, and many of them gave very thoughtful responses that gave us insight into their experience And then when we went to the camps, we interviewed with women who had indicated in the survey that they would be willing to give further testimony. So we heard from them a little bit more about some of these different areas. So just to kind of give a little bit about different aspects of their life. So they are dependent upon aid primarily, and that aid consists of a box of rations that they get once a month. That is oil and rice, lentils, and salt, and they have to make this last for their families. So a lot of the women indicated that they struggled to make the food ration last enough for their family. The primary, responsibility is on these women to look after their families and to cook and to feed. So this is a struggle, a daily struggle for the women. They don't receive regular aid that's non-food. So they don't sanitary products, hygiene products. These are things that they might have received by someone who came to the camps. That someone I had interviewed had received something 6 months ago. So these are not products, and they don't have access to non-food items, including clothing. So some of them missed having just regular decent clothing that they could wear, and that is a very basic need. But there are other ways in which not having an income source has come into play. Some of the women described how they're really, really worried about their daughters not being able to get married because the dowry, they're not able to afford it. And when we had interviewed one of the psychologists, she actually mentioned that some of these parents end up marrying their daughter off to a much, much older man because the dowry demanded from that person is much less than others. So that has also, the dowry price has also led some of these girls to flee. So they've gone to Malaysia, and just it's become a very big burden for them, considering that they have no income source. Some of them work. So we had interviewed a couple who had income sources. One was a tailor, and in fact, her child was the only child that I saw that was wearing a diaper. And so you could see kind of that there were those noticeable differences if someone did have some kind of an income source. But of course, even with that small income, they're still struggling. And I think another major concern that they would mention is their children's education, the quality of their children's education. There was one woman who she sold part of her ration every month so that her daughter could go to a community-led school. There, a lot of the women that we had interviewed, as well as in the survey responses, mentioned that in the learning centers that their children go to, they learn just very basic alphabets, how to write their family's name, and beyond that, there's nothing. And they have hopes and they have dreams for their children to become teachers, to become, all sorts of different professions. And that's another very big concern for these women. Another concern for these women, in particular as Muslim women who cover, is their privacy. As Sister Hannah mentioned, they're all women that cover, and they are living in tents where they're forced to live with a lot of people, family members, male family members, and so they're constantly they're covering themselves at all times of the day. They don't have an opportunity to just be uncovered, and it's rare moments when they're just with sisters and they have that chance. But for the most part, even when they have to use the bathroom, they have to wear their burqa and then stand in a line. One of the sisters mentioned that there were 100 people using about 2 to 3 outhouses outside, so that every time she had to go, she was waiting in this line with her burqa in the sun. And a lot of the women, for privacy reasons, don't want to use the outhouses because there's a risk of exposure in the daytime, and in the nighttime they face harassment on their way to the toilet. So they generally try to avoid, like one of them was saying, I just try not to drink or eat anything after this hour so that I don't have to go to the bathroom. Or and when we interviewed one of the doctors, she mentioned that urinary tract infections were very, very common, in part because they were just sort of avoiding using the bathroom as much as they needed to. So that's a daily struggle that they face in terms of, there are some who have private bathrooms, but it's the majority of who we interviewed, they all had to use these public outhouses, which is an additional strain and struggle for women, especially who cover. And not having sometimes a mahram or a male relatives that's not someone that you can marry. The concept of a mahram is in Islam is that the Muslim women often are protected by a mahram, whether it's their father or their husband. But for many reasons, in part, a lot of them lost their husbands or their fathers in the violence from when they were coming from Burma, or once they've reached the camps, now there's an uprise of gang violence. So naturally, like no income source. So there's some gangs that have formed, and they use that as an opportunity to kidnap children, hold them at ransom, and also try to recruit members into gangs. And so women are also wives and mothers and sisters, and they're very much affected if their husband is being threatened by the gangs. 3 of the women I interviewed, their husbands were not living with them because their husbands were approached to be recruited. They said no, and so now they were being threatened, so they had to go into hiding. So now they're alone in their shelter, raising their children, and worried about the safety constantly of their husbands. Their sons, once they reach around 12 years old, they're also become the target of gangs, and so now they're also being targeted. And so some of them are fleeing the country. That's one thing that they do. Or some of them are forcibly recruited. I met one mother who, like, she was like, I can't even talk about anything else, like food or healthcare or anything. Like, all I want is my son back. He's 12 years old. He was taken by the gangs and forced to work for them. And they called the mother and said, you can have him back if you give us your daughter, who's 14 years old. So now she's hiding her daughter and worried about her son. And they're also demanding money, and she's trying to get money from her neighbors. And it's a very, very distressful situation. And this is something that takes a paramount concern for those families that are affected. And it's something that even if they, everyone recognizes that. It's interesting because the widows that I met with, they were kind of, they were in a better position in one way, because they actually told me, they're like, we don't have a husband or a son that's currently like, bringing that type of stress into the home because of like all of the additional, the targeting of these individuals. So they were relieved of that stress, but they still have family members and daughters, and they're all kind of affected by this. And then at a basic level too, not having a mahram or a male person to go and retrieve the rations, the women reported kind of a lot of challenges trying to get their ration box, because it's mostly men there. They don't want to go into a public space where there's mostly men. And then when they do go, there's, it's a lot of like pushing and shoving. And so it's hard to do even daily tasks without having the male relative there. Healthcare, specifically for women, is an additional struggle. They're giving birth in these camps, and they're essentially only given one type of medicine, which is paracetamol, and that's like for any type of illness or anything that they need. There's like one medicine that they have access to. In the survey responses, we saw a lot of people expressing need for emergency pregnancy services and women-only services. So these were, struggles that especially women who are giving birth, I mean, they're very strong women that you would kind of have to ask them about it because they wouldn't really mention, but inevitably it's very hard to give birth in these camps and then not have access to life-saving, a lot of these illnesses that they contract are very avoidable. And I'll share a little bit from the testimony that we got from the doctor and the psychologist that we interviewed to have a little bit more insight into what they're facing specifically. So the doctor reported a high frequency of skin diseases, especially eczema, which they attribute to poor hygiene and overcrowdedness or the sanitation facilities specifically, as well as urinary tract infection, not drinking sufficient water, acute water diarrhea. And then pneumonia was something that a lot of children were contracting from even just 15, 30 days old. So again, like very kind of treatable illnesses that they were struggling with because of the lack of healthcare access. And then, a very big need for mental health. That was something the doctor mentioned, particularly depression, and then the psychologist as well, depression, anxiety, ongoing stress, PTSD, and keeping in mind that most of these people have witnessed the death of the murder of their loved ones, and when they were coming over, seen a lot of dead bodies, and so there's all of that trauma happening on top of the struggles that they're facing in the camps itself. And the psychologist reported that there was only one medical center within the camps that actually provided psychiatric medicine. So she mentioned there's a lot of schizophrenia, and a lot of these are just untreated, so they're not taking medication. There's not a lot of access to that, and security issues definitely contributed to a lot of the health issues, mental health problems that they faced. Forced marriages and a sense of hopelessness that a lot of people. I think most of the women I spoke to, they carried a hope still. We hope of return back to their country, and a minority of them were so traumatized by what happened that they were like, we just want resettlement, but mostly everyone expressed repatriation. And that is something, they have the concerns as well in the interim time of their children's futures, their education, their marriage, then the physical health challenges they're facing and not having access to treatment. And then on top of that, there's very frequent fires. As we saw a photo earlier, there was women that lost everything 3 times over. And so they had a big fear of fire. And the psychologist that we spoke to mentioned that this fires is a trigger for them because they had their homes burned down in Burma. And now they come into the camps and these fires are happening. They're losing everything. So it's a very, very big struggle for them, even the fire and the flooding that happens as well, that brings its own issues of the diarrhea that was something that was a frequent disease as a result of the flooding that happens at different season. So they're constantly vulnerable to this. Their tents are very fragile, made out of bamboo, plastic. And so that's just a basic additional struggle. And when we left, there was a fire that affected 1,000 tents. So these are not small fires. They affect a lot of homes all at once and very quickly, and sometimes when they're sleeping. So I think that covers most of the different areas that these women express in the report. Will go into more detail, will include some of their own testimonies. As we mentioned, they have very thoughtful insight into what they think could be improved, and we really just want to be able to amplify their voices and to those organizations and government organizations that can actually implement some of these changes. Something as basic as lighting in the camps, that was something a lot of them mentioned, that it was very, very dark. They can't see when they're going to the toilet. So something as like improving lighting, we hope that this can be a way that they can have benefit in even those small ways, but inshallah in bigger and better ways. So thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair, Sabrina. It definitely, just looking at the survey responses was so eye-opening, and we really do hope that people who are working on the ground will make use of the survey. The other big thing that I really felt since our mission was not just to go to organized NGOs and some see the dog and pony show, we went into actual homes. We went into people that we had surveyed and then did further interviews with them. It was very one-on-one, and it was unfiltered. And so that was very, very powerful, is that getting that unfiltered, their own voices. And the other thing that I really, really hope that this report is used by is by the UN and by the Bangladeshi government, like, because the ask, and this is one of the asks that we're going to be working on, is to ask the Bangladeshi government to approve fire retardant material for any of the new shelters that are built. These are easy fixes that because once the fire starts, the entire camp is surrounded by barbed wire. So imagine you don't even have any place to run to. So subhanallah. But one of the other things that we wanted to do while we were there is to make sure that we speak to community leaders and whether leadership within women, because the women also have created the imam's wife is usually somebody who has sway over, and each block tends to have a small masjid. So, and then there are majis and other leadership within the camps. And so Imam Safet, who is our dear brother, who is also a Bosnia genocide survivor, has much insight into what goes on. So what we wanted to do is be the conduit, that we listen to these women, take their surveys, and then share their concerns with the imams and majis of their area, because they might not be able to do that, but they may listen to us as an human rights organization coming in and really move, maybe shape the khutbahs that they're giving, shape the advice that they're giving, listen to them as well, to what they are already doing and how we can assist them, inshallah. So to speak more about this, I'd like to invite our UN Programs Director, Imam Safet Karovich.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for organizing this webinar, and it's wonderful to see members of our team for Justice for All that went together on this. I'm going to call it something that normally, since Sister Henna referred to that before, a journey of a lifetime, which often we use in connection to Hajj. So I think this for any of us was a journey of a lifetime, and the opportunity once again to meet in person with the names, the people who we are fighting for through Burma Task Force over the years for their rights and protection of their basic human dignity and their religion, Islam. So I'm going to be speaking a little bit on some of the, although we all had a chance to meet with various members of the community, various sections, representatives from different sectors of the society, of our Rohingya brothers and sisters there. I did spend quite a bit of time meeting with the imams, the teachers in the madrasas, and also some of the Maji leaders, that is the community leaders that work hand in glove, hand in hand with the imams on the community issues and issues of community concern. And I'd like to uplift Sister Henna's statement in that having an inside observer that is able to articulate and help to articulate that which is happening, for example, to our sisters, in a new way or in maybe a different way than it has already been shared with regard to the religious leadership in the camps is critical, because it allows the imams, the teachers of the madrasas, the ustazas, the female sheikhas that are there to be able to be better empowered and maybe motivated to move forward and have some new ideas to move forward on providing advice, direction, and guidance, pastoral care, as we say within the chaplaincy work, to the members of their community. I want to just highlight the importance of the reality that imams, sheikhas, ustazas, teachers in madrasas themselves are also the victims of the genocide. They suffered it along with the people that are there, and therefore they have their own struggles with what modern medical terminology is used, PTSD and other types of things, as they're trying to provide counsel and guidance to others. They are also heads of families and households who are responsible to provide for their family members as well financially, and this is also something which limits and challenges them as well as they try to outreach and provide much needed spiritual guidance, religious direction, and instruction to the communities. Let me just give a little bit of background, and I know a lot has already been shared before, echoing a lot of what has been said. First of all, religiously, we heard over and over again that our Rohingya brothers and sisters, are a community that is deeply religious and finds solace in their faith. And a commandment of our faith, the first commandment given to our Prophet Muhammad Islam, Amr al-Hada, the primary command, is Iqra, is to read, to learn, to get education. This is one of the reasons that Justice for All Through Burma Task Force, before my joining the team a couple of years ago, was very active in putting together various types of reports. I don't know if this is visible. Let the Rohingya Learn. That this was one of the many reports that we did, and this became a focus of our advocacy work in terms of providing education for the nearly 500,000 school-aged children that are living within the camps. And that education covers various areas of work, both the NGO schools, as well as we heard about the community schools from Brother Zahir, but it also covers the area of the madrasas or the madaris. And we always highlight in our work the importance of uplifting women's education, which sometimes is neglected for various reasons or not provided for as it should be. And this is a primary concern of Justice for All, and it is also in keeping with our following of the Prophet's command, Talibul ilmi faridatan ala kulli muslim al muslima. The acquisition of knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim, male and female. That means the means through which that knowledge is received, is gotten, is also an obligation upon all of us to ensure that that happens. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted in 1948, recognizes education as a fundamental human right. And this principle is reinforced by various international laws and agreements, such as the Convention on the Rights of Children, which emphasizes the right of every child to education. Both of these documents have been widely adopted, including being ratified by the government of Bangladesh, through which we spend a lot of time in our effort trying to work with them to advocate for the Rohingya situation, especially with regard to education. A little bit of background that was mentioned before about the Rohingya community and how it ended up in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. Not to go through a detailed history, but to show the importance of the madrasa over time. Systematic oppression and state persecution started in a more systematic way in the 1970s, although before then it was also taking place. Increasingly draconian laws and restrictions on movement, access to education, and ultimately the denial of citizenship in 1982 rendered the Rohingya community the largest stateless population in the world while they were living in their ancestral homes. Our president of Justice for All in Burma Task Force, Imam Malik Mujahid, in an earlier report, spoke about the Rohingya community facing apartheid before genocide in their ancestral home of Arakan State in the nation of Burma, Myanmar. Sum total of this experience is the Rohingya children, by and large, were denied access to government-run schools and educations while they were in Burma and Myanmar. The madrasa's school system was the system that stepped up with the imams and with their teachers to try to address this situation with their limited resources. And they did so in the best way that they could, providing an alternative route to education, to knowledge, to access of religious knowledge, but also access of literal knowledge, the ability to read and to write. They provided this accessibility when the normal schooling or the community and government-run schools were denied to the school-age children of the Rohingya community. In 2017, things changed. 2017, the masjids and the madrasas were targeted and burned as part of what was the final solution or the clearance operations by the Burmese military. A full-blown genocide was in place, and many of the imams almost actually all of the imams that I met with and madrasa teachers had found themselves in the camps of Cox's Bazar, fleeing that genocide in 2017. So a lot of that, the leadership that is there is a leadership that is based on the initial genocide, not so much the newcomers in 2017. In the refugee camps of Cox's Bazar, imams play a central role in the community. In general, imams and ustazas and sheikhas are those who are present with the community, live within the community, and are present with them during all the important stages and milestones of their life, both those that are sad as well as those that are joyous. They are directly connected to the people. One of the concerns that was raised many times was the idea that despite the fact that, for example, UNICEF and UNHCR have been doing an incredible job, UNHCR in terms of the structure of the camp, the layout, the design, etc., with the criticisms, some of the criticisms being valid, and UNICEF with regard to trying to coordinate the educational system with NGO partners and the community schools, which we heard about, that are actually self-funded and self-organized by the communities themselves in the various camps and subcamps, was that there is an aloofness or some sort of a non-connection to the reality of the daily lives of the people outside of the community schools and the madrasas, and that means the imams. They are not in touch with the needs, with the desires of those who they are supposed to be caring for. And so this is a critical point. The imams, because of this, become the most trusted source in most cases for information for the refugees through the various platforms of Salatul Jummah, through the madrasas and through the Islamic schools, as well as through community meetings and family visitations. They are the ones who become a source of information, trusted source of information and knowledge and guidance for the community. And in many cases, and I was specifically pleased to be able, while I was reading with the imams, to also meet immediately after the prayers in several of the madrasas and masjids that I had visited, was the community leaders who were bringing issues directly to the imam and having conversations as to collectively how they can resolve particular issues facing particular families within the camps that they were responsible for. Many parents, and I spoke to some of the students as well as some of the parents who had sent their students to the madrasa, and this has been highlighted by other research that has been done by other organizations, including TWB, that the community, which we mentioned before, the Rohingya community, is a religious community, is a community that is connected to their faith. When asked, why would you send your child to a madrasa, they cite two main reasons. One, we trust the teachers. Second, we want to ensure that the religious, ethical, and moral teachings of Islam are part and parcel of our children's life and experiences. And thirdly, which we don't talk about too often, that even though the schools are run, for example, the what they call the learning centers or the official schools are run by UNICEF and NGO partners, there is often a cost associated with not attending the school, but uniforms, supplies, and other items that are connected to the school that parents are required to pay. And with regard to the madrasa, there is no cost or a very small cost associated with parents sending their children to the madrasa to study. Let me continue a little bit. Many of the imams that I spoke with and who shared openly said that they had faced in Myanmar and Burma restriction of resources and abilities, for example, for additional trainings for imams to go forward. And that continued and only worsened when they came to the camps within Cox's Bazar. You see, there is no direct way in which madrasas are recognized, nor masajid in the UNHCR zoning plan, if you want to use that terminology, of the actual layout and design physical structures of the camps. So a lot of that, the areas that are being utilized for madrasa as well as for the masajid are areas that are not formally part of the physical infrastructure of the camps. They are self-financed primarily by the members of the community themselves, who were, as was mentioned before, are extremely difficult financial as well as situation. Yet, despite that, they give and they help to support. A second area of challenge that the Imam spoke of is that they are unable to receive on a consistent basis support from the larger Bangladeshi religious community of Imams. Bangladesh, according to some research, is the country that has the second most number of madrasas in the world after Indonesia. So they have a tremendously organized, what they call aliyah structure, which is a governmental structure of madrasas, but also Qawmi, which means people's madrasas, which are the type of madrasas that we find in the context of Cox's Bazar. But because the imams in Cox's Bazar's training and education was through Darul Uloom, primarily through in India and in Pakistan, and in their traditional schools of learning within Arakan state within Burma, their language of instruction and learning was Urdu, not the Bengali language. The Rohingya language is not a written language, in case it has not been mentioned before. It is a spoken language. So the written language, the language of scholarship, is the Urdu language. And this is not the language that is utilized by the Islamic communities, religious leaders within the context of Bangladesh. So there's a difficulty in finding relationships that can help to support the various efforts that they're involved in. Now, in terms of numbers, 44% to 50% of out-of-school age students, meaning they do not attend the regular schools, neither the UNHCR UNICEF schools, nor the schools that are run by NGOs that are in partnership with UNICEF, nor the community schools which we mentioned. So 44% of those school-age students attend the madrasas. According to the numbers that the imams provided to me and the teachers of the madrasas, they have 162 madrasas in the camps as of our visit and trip to Cox's Bazar. The number of students per school, depending on the madrasa, run anywhere from 300, in some cases up to 800 to 1,000. All in all, approximately, and they didn't have hard numbers on this, over 100,000 students are attending the madrasas in various capacities. In various ways, either full-time, meaning the morning time from 7:30 to 12:30, or and also the afternoon. It continues from 2 to 4:30, the full day activities, or part of that day's activities, day's learning sessions. Of the 162 madrasas, there are only 2 madrasas that receive or are madrasas dedicated for women. The ages within the madrasa of the students that attend are 7, and in some cases going all the way up to the age of 32, but I did not see any 32-year-olds in the madrasas that I had visited. Their challenges are many. One is recognition of the schools themselves in some way, shape, or form, so that they are able to access resources both from the NGO community as well as from through UNICEF. This is something that they continue to speak about. Secondly, the fact that the schools not being recognized can be closed down, although, as was mentioned before, the Bangladeshi government and the leadership within the camp sort of turn a blind eye to the schools, recognizing that they do provide a safe place for students to learn and young people to be cared for in terms of their educational and also in terms of their time. That, free time is the devil's workshop, as they say. So that they provide this time for students to be able to be involved in positive and constructive things. They face the same problems as other areas of the camp. There is no electricity within the camp. The only power sources that they have are the solar light bulbs, and unfortunately, till now, they are deprived, like the rest of the camp and the community schools, which were mentioned before, of any sort of backup battery storage system that would allow them to use those facilities when the skies are overcast or at nighttime. There is no secular subjects that are taught within the madrasa system, in the Qalmi madrasa system. It is only religious subject matter. And this was an issue of concern for a couple of the parents that I spoke with. They said, once my son or daughter completes their studies in the madrasa, what can they do? What will they do? Within the context of the camps, there is no real employment, except for what they call day laborers, where there is employment to fix emergency situations around the camp. People get paid for the work for the day. And there is some sort of, but it's not legal, some sort of buying and selling that takes place, because market and any sort of business endeavor is not allowed. So these are periodically closed when they start up. There is room for people to do some sort of technical training, and there are technical training schools which we visited as well, vocational schools that provide for education in terms of sewing and embroidery for women and girls, and solar light installation, and single burner liquefied gas stove trainings, how to maintain them, how to fix them for young people. But there are a limited number of those who attend. But basically, the parents said, where do we go from here? What will our children do when they graduate the schools? While being happy with the madrasa system, they said, what will they be able to do with the information and the knowledge that they learn in terms of a life skill to be able to provide them going forward? The imams expressed concern that I spoke with of the various challenging issues the community is facing, and these are changing from time to time. We specifically spoke in a very open way about the issues of domestic violence that are a result of the pressures in the camp of living under such straitened and difficult circumstances and situations. The issues of child marriages, early marriages. They said that they tried to address this and have begun to address this in their khutbahs and their various community meetings, working closely with the community leaders, but they expressed a desire to be able to have more information, recognizing limitations of the traditional system of Islamic learning that they have gotten through. Secondly, they also recognize the fact that in dealing with these issues, and especially when you talk about trafficking, which is something of immediate concern, is that as they are the ones who speak about the issues, they are the ones who are targeted by the various criminal gangs and criminal enterprises that are involved in these illicit activities that are taking place within the camps. So they expressed a desire to be able to learn more, to be able to provide what we would call professional development training in the context of schooling and education and teachers within other contexts. So it's something that we need to think about as well. That's sort of a summary of what I wanted to share with all of you. And I know I went over my time, so thank you, Sister Hannah, for allowing me to do so. And I'm open to any questions that you may have. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Safet, for those insights. And I really, really believe that this is the reason of existence of Justice for All, is that we are able to give a perspective that other human rights organizations just simply cannot. We are a Muslim-led, anti-genocide, human rights advocacy organization. We work from a Islamic perspective. And so some of the questions that we would ask and we would understand and bring perspective to, just like what Imam Safet just very deeply went into, there's no way that anybody else can, because just understanding is not, and then importance. Some of the NGOs that we spoke to, who are Bangladeshi NGOs working and doing a fabulous job, they expressed a lot of concerns, and parents expressed much concern that many of the secular NGOs that are in the camps and working are changing the culture of the Rohingya people. Children used to say Assalamu alaikum when they met somebody, a teacher, or even an NGO worker, and now they say hi. And this was, and I know in the broad scheme of things, okay, you're not dying and you have food on your table, at least, right? And you have a tent over your head. But when you've lost everything, your home, your country, your people, your everything, and the only thing that you can hold on to, your identity, your deen, your Islam, and that is being taken away because of your people are trying to help, but in the manner that they're trying to help is impacting their culture. So that is something that is, I just did want to share my reflections on that. Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, now I would like to invite our Director of Outreach, Brother Rafiuddin Ahmed. He's traveling overseas and it's really late at night for him there, but I'm so grateful to him for joining us because subhanallah, I have never seen Brother Rafi emotional. And it takes mountains to move this man, but subhanallah, being in the camps really, really impacted him. So I'd love to hear from him.
Jazakallah khairan, sister. Thank you very much to all of my colleagues who have provided the insight. Brothers and sisters, in December 2024, Justice for All took a delegation of my colleagues and some volunteers into the Rohingya refugee camps. And our purpose was to visit and interview, especially the new arrivals, to capture their experience, what they encountered in Burma. Why is it that they had to leave their country? As Sister Hina mentioned, I'm not a very emotional person. I don't cry easily. But that was a very emotional experience for me. I did not think that I would experience such an experience talking to some of my brothers and sisters as to what they encountered. As you know, more than about the second phase of the genocide started in May of 2024. The genocide never ended. It's been going on for a long time. As Imam Safed also mentioned about some of the history of the genocide. But what we captured, it's going to be hard for me to share all the stories of everyone that we interviewed. For that, inshallah, hopefully you will be able to read our report and also be able to further distribute the report. Our goal is to share the report with United Nations and also for our State Department and also on Capitol Hill and with other Muslim leaders so everyone can hear the heartfelt stories of the people that we interviewed during our visit. Our brothers and sisters are really being executed there. As you know, this fight is a civil war right now in Burma. Our Khan Army and other factions of the Burmese resistance are fighting the Burmese army. So what we heard from some of my brothers and sisters is that Burmese army or any of these army first come in to the villages where they come into the village and they separate Hindus and Buddhists. And then they start killing Muslims. Sometime they will send a warning into the village telling Buddhists and Hindus to leave the areas, and then the fighting begins. Regardless of which army arrives in the village first, they take away all their food. They take away their livestock, the vegetations and all. And then the attack begins. And they are using drones to target Muslims. Burma doesn't had drones, and especially Arkan army also having drones. That tells you that there are other forces behind them who are supporting this genocide. We heard stories of people, once the artillery starts, that it is people start running and they start leaving their villages. We heard stories of people having to walk over dead bodies as they're fleeing their village. We're hearing stories about the entire family leaving the village and only one person out of that family arriving in Bangladesh. And these people have experienced death of their own loved one. This brother that you see the picture of right now, he's 43 years old. He was a merchant in Burma and a community worker as well. His story is very painful, very painful. He left with his family. He witnessed on the way, there was a lake in the area, 400 dead bodies of Muslims. Many of them, he said that he could recognize they were from his village. He witnessed rape of Muslim women by Arkan army. And he tried to stop. And the soldiers attacked him and broke his arm. So therefore, he had to flee the area and leave. So we have eyewitnesses who are seeing rape as being as a weapon. Then there are stories of this brother here who you're seeing right now. He's a 64-year-old person. I can relate to him because I'm 61 years old. He's a grandfather just like me. He had his mother that lived with him in his house in Burma. He has a huge family, sons and daughters and grandchildren. He heard noises in the middle of the night, went outside to inquire what those noises are about. As soon as he stepped out, an artillery shell hit his house. His mother, who was 85 years old, was inside the house, died, burned alive. As he was leaving with his family on his route to Bangladesh, they witnessed many dead bodies. They traveled for more than 5 days on foot. No food, no help. We heard stories of Muslims being used as human shields. We heard stories of torturing of Muslims. We heard stories of army gathering young Muslim girls and good-looking Muslim women, and they are never to be seen again. And of course, they're being violated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what they're doing to them, if they're alive or they kill them after they abuse them. Starvation is happening there. The neighbors come and tell Muslims to leave. This is not your country. Now, you may think that, Rohingyas maybe migrated to Burma 20, maybe 50 years ago. When the colonial, when Great Britain had colonized Burma, one of their reporters had written a report in 1798 about presence of Mohammedans, which he meant Muslims. So late 1700s, there has been reports of Muslim being there. So Rohingyas are not foreign to Burma. They're native, and they're being told to leave because they are Muslims and they don't belong in Burma. We have a perception that, and I don't mean to single out any religious, community, but there's a perception of that the Buddhist monks are very, very peaceful. I'm sure a majority of them are. However, these Buddhist monks are the ones who are attacking our brothers and sisters. The Muslims are being given a choice of either leave Burma or be killed. The situation is very dire. And many times as the new arrivals are arriving into Bangladesh, the entries are being denied. In many cases, these people who have left their homeland with only the clothes on their back, because when their house is burning, when they're being shot at, when they are targeting by artillery and by drones, you don't have time to collect your valuables so you can take them with you on your journey. They're leaving. They're frantically leaving the area. And as they arrive to the border of Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is not immune to any corruption, just like majority of the Muslim world, unfortunately. And they're being asked to come up with some money. Where are they going to come up with this money when you have left everything that you own, everything of your possession back home? So there's many, many difficulties that these brothers and sisters who have left their back home. And I mentioned that this was a very emotional experience for me personally. As I hugged some of these brothers who were proud men, as I mentioned, as a Muslim man, as a man, actually, doesn't matter if you are a a Muslim or what religion or ethnicity or nationality you are. As a man, you take pride of being a head of the household. You take a pride of providing for your family. You take pride in protecting your family. I saw pain in these brothers' eyes that they failed. They failed to protect their family. They failed to provide for their family. They had to leave a lot of their family members behind because they were targeted and they were killed. Now they arrived into the camps now. The new arrivals are not given any shelters. So they're having to share shelters with people, either their relatives or some kind-hearted people who share their shelters with them. As Sister Hina had mentioned, they are living in 10 by 10 shelters made out of bamboo and tarp. And most of these 10 by 10 shelters accommodate about 10 people. Even on top of that, they find in their heart and accommodate some of these family members. And, some of these family, the new arrivals, their families are broken up because they cannot be accommodated in one shelter because they don't have a shelter of their own. 2 members may be living in this camp, another 2 members may be living in another camp, which are far away from each other. And the traffic from camp to camp by these refugees is restricted. Now, there are other situation of them having the food ration token. From what at the time that we had visited, we were told that UNCHR had stopped giving these food tokens about 15 days ago. So now these people don't have anything to eat. So what happens? Their loved ones are sharing from the ration that they're getting, and which is, in general case, is not enough to feed their own families, but they find it in their heart to share it with the new arrivals. Now, I've talked to many people. Nobody gets to eat more than twice a day. There are some new arrivals that I had spoken to. They mentioned they can go as much as 3 days without having anything to eat. As I mentioned, I hugged these brothers. I cried with them. And I made a promise to them that I will share their stories with the rest of the world. I will help in elevating their voices to the places where it matters. I cannot do it alone. Justice for All cannot do it alone. We need your help. This is why we're doing this webinar. Brothers and sisters, this is not a situation. This is not a situation where it is left to just Bangladeshi people or Bangladesh to resolve. This is a human tragedy. This is our Muslim brothers and sisters, and we all need to pitch in to help. Justice for All needs your help. We need you to distribute our action alert or our call to action when we share these reports, when we need to put pressure on our elected officials. They need to hear from their constituents. You as Muslim leaders are going to be the conduit for us to be able to accomplish that. We need each one of you to allow us to come into your masajid and hold workshops so we can educate your community as to what the situation is. We need you to help us raise some funds so we can help those people in the camps. We heard stories about not having enough comforters, and we went there during their winter time. We heard stories about women not having hygiene products, women hygiene products. We heard stories about babies not having enough formula or diapers. This situation needs to end. It needs to end with your help. The best solution is for these Rohingya brothers and sisters to return back to Burma under the protection of UN, back to their countries, and their lands and their properties need to return back to them. So, brothers and sisters, I'm making an appeal to all of you who are online and those who are watching at home. Justice for All needs your help. If you can help us arrange visits to your communities, to your masajid, please let me know. And if you have any questions, I'll be here to answer them. But my email is Rafi, R-A-F-I, at justiceforall.org. Email me if you are able to help us, inshallah. With that, inshallah, I will conclude and I will turn back over to Sister Hina, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Rafi, for that. SubhanAllah, comes from the heart and you can feel it. SubhanAllah, may Allah accept your concerns and may Allah help us do the best that we can do for the brothers and sisters. It's an amana that they gave us, and I hope we all fulfill the amana. Inshallah, we're all here to answer any questions that you may have. So please post them in the chat or in the Q&A. And if anybody would like to, once the report comes out, inshallah, we're leaning on the community to help spread it, especially in places because a lot of fundraising takes place using the name of the Rohingya people. And Ramadan is coming, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that fundraising being conducted. But inshallah, as Muslims, we aim to elevate and do things with ihsan. So even this humanitarian work needs to be done with ihsan, and to use the work that we have done to elevate their work would be that would for us be a success, inshallah. We are, again, not a humanitarian organization. We will not raise funds to take blankets to the Rohingya camps, as Brother Rafi was saying, but they do need blankets. The last time that blankets were distributed in the camps was 7 years ago, and not everybody got them, subhanAllah. So, yes, let me just check and see if there are any Q&A. I believe there was one from our dear brother Habib Siddiqui, and Brother Adil has responded. Inshallah, education is going to be one of our prime priority in the next year. We do believe changes can be made, and those changes would not require major restructuring. So inshallah, that is our prime focus for 2025 is Rohingya education, inshallah. Just recently, Imam Mujahid was in Malaysia, and he met with the Malaysian Prime Minister, and he handed our request over to him as well in person. And inshallah, as much pressure as that can be put on the Bangladeshi government to allow education of Rohingya children, so a third generation is not lost, inshallah. So alhamdulillah, I don't think we have any questions in the Q&A. So jazakallah khair to all of you for joining us, and may Allah bless all of you. So inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Alaikum salam.
Wonderful.